Hello and welcome to episode 5 of And Action. I'm Tommy DiNucci and I'm here with Mike Messier. And tonight we are going to talk about a horror movie called The Manor that I produced and co wrote with my co host, Mike Messier. Mike, how are you, brother?
I'm good. It's a hot day here in Jacksonville, Florida, and I'm happy to be on the show. And I watched the movie again last night for the first time since the premiere back in 2018, and I'm glad I did because watching it last night, I think, gave me a better balanced perspective on the project we're going to talk about today.
Yeah, it's been a while for me too. It was cool to kind of watch it again. Just real quick, we're checking in. We got Stephen E, we got Kim, we got Johnny. Great to see you. We can't believe it's already episode 5 of And Action. We've been having a real blast kind of bringing this show to you. So thank you for the support. And we look forward to building our little film community here and making some new friends and telling some really fun film stories as Donna checks in. What's happening, Donna? So we're going to kind of get right into it. Tonight we're broadcasting to you on a Wednesday night. Normally we do Tuesday nights. This was just a little bit of a switcheroo because I was traveling on a little business trip, which I hope to tell you more about down the road. But for now, let's get right into it. Mike, you're better with dates than me. This all started a while ago. I'm going to kind of tell the backstory. I would say this was probably in around, I don't know, 2016-ish. Does that sound about right, Mike?
I want to say that the 5-minute proof of concept video was shot in the summer of 2015. Then
Okay, cool.
you brought me on maybe October of 2015 to
Well,
co-write.
let's back it up and kind of start over, just because this really all begins with one fateful night that I'm sitting at a bar about to go to a film, some kind of like a Rhode Island film Oscars kind of dinner party,
Okay.
and I get a tap on the shoulder, and it's these two very very friendly gentlemen
Yeah.
who offer to buy me a drink, and they're like, "Are you Tommy DiNucci?" And I'm somewhat hesitant, and I'm like, "Yeah."
Okay.
And they're like, "Oh well, we've heard a little bit about your career, and we're really excited to meet you, and we've been trying to kind of track you down at a few events, and we're happy to get a hold of you. We got a project we'd love to talk to you about." So one thing led to another, and I ended up just kind of seeing them at a lot of events, and they kind of tracked me down. And eventually, I said, "You know what? These guys are ambitious enough. Let's have a coffee. Let's meet."
Sure.
So I met the two cousins. That's we refer to them. You're gonna hear that a lot. The two cousins. Not only is that the name of their production company, but they actually are cousins. It's Matt and Glenn.
Yeah.
So I met Matt and Glenn, and they had this concept for a kind of a dark, twisted horror movie, and it was going to be shot at this creepy mansion which they had access to, called Anders Manor. So one of the first steps to the process was, we're sitting down having coffee, and I said, "All right, well, guys, bring me on as a consultant, and I can kind of show you some of the ways that we do this." Uh, so, real quick, if you don't know, that's something that's very common in the business. You bring someone in early on who's maybe produced films or has some experience. You bring them on to consult on your project, and I kind of like broke it all down for them and said, "Well, one of the first things that you should do is get yourself a proof of concept piece, a trailer of some kind. Write yourself like a 3 minute, 4 minute piece, and just go out and shoot it." And
Okay.
that's what they did. And that's why the two cousins were so cool. They kind of just like they were ambitious and they went for it, and they raised a little bit of funds, and they put together this trailer for, I think, to the tune of maybe a few $1,000s. Uh, and it was really nicely done, like very high end, great production value.
Don't be too
Mike
modest because
was,
you pretty much directed the proof of concept video. Is that right?
I did, yeah, that was kind of
Okay.
part of the deal. I came on to direct this trailer, and we had a blast, and kind of opened my eyes when the cousins showed me this location.
Yes.
It's all about, sometimes movies and real estate share one thing: location, location, location. It's like it's one of those things where they took me to this place and I saw it, and here's this big, basically like a big 3-story mansion in the middle of nowhere, kept up, but still, I don't want to say decrepit, but there was an eerie vibe to it, that, it just looked like it had this kind of bizarre quality to it.
It had a
And
history. It had a presence.
yeah, it really did. And it had a very long driveway and it had some cool wood surrounding it. So there was a lot to work with there. And I saw that and immediately, we talked about this on some of our other shows, but one of the kind of key elements you're looking for in a small movie, lower production budget is one location where you know that you can kind of shoot it from multiple locations but stay in one place. And I knew that the Manor had that right away. So we shot this trailer, and then it was like, okay, now what do we do? It was like, all right, well, now we get this trailer working for ourselves. And Matt and Glenn made a Facebook page, and I helped them with that. And we started uh, doing a lot of kind of unique marketing kind of projects, if you will, where we would basically take frames from the trailer and tease it out. We didn't just play the trailer right away. We kind of would build up this audience and say that it's coming soon. And sure enough, it wasn't too long before I want to say we had like almost 1,000 Facebook likes or whatever it is. And we kind of built up this little following and we played the trailer and a lot of people got interest in it. And then with that, Matt and Glenn kind of just rolled up their sleeves and were like, all right, we want to make this movie. What do we do? I said, well, you need money, obviously. That's what we got to get to. We got to get some funds. And they're like, how do we do that? I'm like, well, usually on a movie like this size, it's private equity. It's someone writing a check. It's you pounding the pavement and looking for people to help you out that believe in what you're doing. Um, Now, normally that would come from, a group of investors and, keep it kind of like a smaller group. Matt and Glenn went with kind of a non-conventional route. I mean, not only did they write checks themselves, but they brought in a lot of people. I mean, it was almost like, it seemed like their entire neighborhood was behind this project, and every cousin that they knew and family member and friend, and they got, tons of donations. And they had one really unique approach, which, Mike, why don't you tell everyone about Funny for Funds and
Funny
what they
for
did with that?
Yeah, Funny for Fun's are good guys. It's group out of Rhode Island. They're professional comedians. I think it's two main guys that run the group, and they're also the comedians. And basically, if you have a fund, a charity that you're looking to raise money for, these guys will come and do a charity comedy show for your subject matter, and they'll split up in a pretty generous way the profits, of that event. So instead of people just giving money for no reason, or not no reason, but just instead of a straight out donation that's like charity, it's like, hey kids, let's put on a show. And these guys have it down to a science. In fact, I've seen more than one Funny for Fun show. I went to see this one and I ended up seeing them again later on. And they're very professional, they're funny. I think for the show that the cousins had in Warwick, Rhode Island, they actually had like a headlining act. I can't remember the guy's name, but he was a non-Rhode Island comedian who came in to do the Funny for Fun show. And that was a huge success, Tommy. Like that night, I think convinced a lot of people, maybe you and myself too, that these guys, Glenn and Matt, the cousins, were legit.
Yeah, they packed a big house full of people that were willing to support their film, and then they raised a decent amount of funds and found some other investors, and it kind of spiraled. And before you knew it, they had a decent chunk of change to play with. And then we will enter my good friend and a longtime collaborator, my buddy Richard Switzer was involved, and he got involved and basically Richard's a really great guy, and he's one of these kids who's kind of almost like a savant of the film business.
Prodigy.
Got involved when, yeah, like he got involved in the business when he was 18 years old. And I know what you're thinking. Oh, he must have an uncle in the business, or oh, he must have some rich aunt who gave him $1 million. Nope, nothing like that. Richard just utilized a lot of very unique tactics, and we could go into a whole different episode talking about all the really cool things that Richard's done at such a young age. He's still, I don't even think he's 27 years old yet and has a pretty incredible body of work. So I brought Richard in because he's, got a lot of great connections, particularly uh, distributors and various financing groups. And we did what was called a match play kind of a deal. And a match play deal is basically when you partner up with a production company that already has a foothold in the business, and they're there to kind of, well, if you bring X amount of dollars to the table, they're going to match that. So, I don't really like to talk too much about budgets and numbers because frankly, a lot of that gets into legal issues, and I'm really not at liberty to say a whole lot
Sure.
at certain times. But so these numbers don't reflect anything. But basically, if you were to say raise $50,000, you might be able to find a match play company to match that 50,000. And now you two are partners 50-50. The thing is they're going to do a lot less work, so to speak, meaning, part of that, them coming to the table, they expect you to pull off the movie a certain way. So that was kind of how we got things cooking. So Glenn and Matt, the cousins, raised some funds. We got a match play deal going, and next thing you knew it, we had some funds, and that's when the casting begins.
Can we go
The
back
first.
though, if you don't mind, Tommy? I think we kind of glossed over, at least from my perspective, an important part of the story, which is the shooting of the one-day teaser. I think we kind of glossed over that, but I think that's very important. The proof
Yeah,
of
I mean,
concept.
I think that it is, but there's just so much to get into. Basically, what was cool about the one day teaser, I think was just the high level of production value. It
Right.
really looked like a movie trailer. It looked like something that if you saw it, you'd believe that there's more to it. That was kind of like how we designed it. We
Right.
designed it so that it would kind of leave you wanting more. Um, and the story basically centers around a young girl who's on vacation, who recently got out of an insane asylum, and this is like one of her first sort of weekends away, and it's her birthday, and she's going to meet up with all of her long lost relatives at an old place that they used to go to as a family called the Manor. And that's kind of the basic premise, but then of course there's a bit of a demon involved that may or may not be within the girl's mind, and it kind of all plays out. And I don't want to tell. We try to avoid certain spoilers on the show because we do want you to check these movies out. But one area that we did gloss over, I think, is the scripting process. You know, so part of while we were raising funds, and keep in mind this all happened pretty quickly, and
Yeah.
a lot of this is happening in concert. A lot of this is like they're raising funds for the movie while basically step two, all right, what do we do? We've got this trailer that's really cool. We've got some ideas for the story, but we don't really have a script. And that's kind of what I was getting at with Matt
The
and Glenn.
proof
I
of
was like,
the
well, you
proof
guys
of
need a
yeah.
script.
The proof of concept was actually filmed before there was a full feature length script, to my knowledge. There was
That's
kind
right.
of a half length script, and I'm not picking fun of it. I'm just saying it wasn't a full 90-page script when the proof of
No,
concept was filmed. So we're kind of doing things a little bit out of order traditionally. I would also like to say about the teaser that I want to give a lot of credit to Matt of the two cousins because he actually allowed his body to be modified, specifically his hair to be shaved bald, to play what at the time was called the standing man. And I thought, for what it's worth, for a non-actor, even for anybody, I thought he was really creepy and effective in that
yeah, it just goes
bizarre
to show you
character.
how convicted. Yeah, he was very convicted in making this happen and making it as creepy and interesting as he could at the time. Um, so basically, like Mike said, we did this all kind of out of order, but it was a little bit of an unorthodox approach from the beginning. So it kind of almost made sense that everything was out of order. Uh, so while the cousins are raising money for the movie, I've been hired now to write the script. Because keep in mind, they've been raising chunks of money as they go, so they broke off a portion. Now that's kinda I'm responsible for writing the script, but I had a lot going on in my career at the time and was really, kinda I believe at the time I had already I think I was starting to write Vault, and things were getting pretty intense for me. Uh, B. Dolan and I were really cranking on that draft, and Listen, I'm going to be very honest, and I'm, in this episode, I plan on revealing a lot of kind of candid things that I did maybe incorrectly and mistakes that I might have made as a filmmaker in the past. I'm not going to try to beat myself up too much for it, but I think it's important to kind of reflect every now and then. And sometimes it takes a great amount of time, even years, to look back and be like, yeah, I probably should have done I probably should have zigged when I zagged on that one, or I probably should have done this differently. So this is going to be a really great chance to talk about that. And one of those things that I probably should have done differently was just focus on that a little bit more. Um, but I just didn't have the time. So what I did was I brought on my trusted buddy Mike Messier to come in and basically partner up with me and the cousins and start writing the draft. And there were a lot of you know Matt and Glenn weren't doing this as their day job. This was, very much a secondary. I don't want to say hobby because I think hobby has a negative uh, tone, and they were
Passion,
certainly trying.
secondary
Yeah,
passion,
yeah, it was a passion of theirs.
passion
So we would
project.
do a lot of coffee meetings, a lot of stops at the bar, a lot of socializing while getting this thing together. And sometimes there was more socializing going on than the writing. And I remember Mike and I just kind of wanted to like, all right, yo, let's just get these pages done. But
Yeah,
Matt and Glenn were very much into, they wanted to milk every part of the writing process and experience it. And I get that because this was the first time that they had ever done it. Whereas Mike and I were kind of just like, I don't want to say we were just trying to like get in and out and write that script, but we were just kind of like, all right, yes, guys, that would be cool, but like we got to make this work for a certain budget, and
right.
we went through a lot of growing pains, just basically explaining like the mixing of mojos. I remember that was one big thing. This movie initially, the script had a lot of different horror themes in it. Everything from I remember one draft had like demonic dolls,
Yeah,
another draft had actual demons, another draft had like zombie-like characters, and it was actually Mike who kind of coined that phrase. Let's not mix mojos, and kind of took a
right.
hard look at the script and said, all right, you got a lot of themes and vibes and things going on. And it really was a case of addition by subtraction, where we started removing these elements. And as we removed the elements, the script actually got better.
We removed the dolls was the first thing to go. The term Tommy actually came from a screenwriting teacher of mine at the University of Rhode Island named Christopher Menzel. I want to give him
Oh,
credit.
take credit for it. God damn it.
Well, his term of double mojos, which basically means you can have a ghost in a movie or you can have a talking dog, but you can't have a talking dog and a ghost in the same movie because the audience will buy one or the other, but not both. And in this horror film genre, which sometimes I kind of parallel to punk rock for music, um, meaning it's a very do it yourself aesthetic at times with horror films. But for this, the cousins were kind of throwing it all out there, like everything was getting thrown against the wall, and we had to pare that back a little bit. From my perspective, a lot of the writing process was me kind of writing pages on my own at Brood Awakenings or Java Madness in South County, Rhode Island, and then basically having like a once every 2 weeks or once every 3 weeks bull session with either just the cousins, yourself, or later on another gentleman became part of the bull sessions. When I say bull sessions, it just means conversations where everyone's kind of opinionated. What was frustrating for me, Tommy, as a writer, was everyone seemed to have even at that time, people had different perspectives on what they wanted, what worked, what didn't. Characters were kind of coming and going at times. And to me, it was a little bit frustrating because I felt like, am I trying to honor a story or a script, or am I trying to honor 3 or 4 other men's opinions? You know what I mean? And so it got to be, I remember like towards the 2/3 mark of the script writing, I actually slowed down a bit because I was getting a little stressed out. Like, how do I serve all these different, not to say masters, but collaborators? How do I make everybody happy? It was hard.
Yeah, I think this was a clear-cut case of too many cooks in the kitchen in the scripting process, and it really is difficult. I mean, I've been writing for a while now, and this was the first movie that I have a writing credit on with like 3 other people. And
Right.
no offense to the cousins, no offense to Mike, no offense to the other person who we're going to get into that in a in a minute or two. But the other person Mike was talking about, as director Jonathan Schermerhorn, who was brought into the writing room and given an opportunity to kind of weigh in creatively on some things before we shot the movie, which was something that we wanted to give him that opportunity. And really, it just ended up being a situation where now you have five people in a circle yanking the script in really several different directions. And me trying to do my best to just kind of mediate. Unfortunately, my head was probably more in the dollars and cents game, meaning like, can we actually pull this script off at this number?
Right.
Whereas, that probably clouded some of my creative visions at the time. I think that Jonathan Schermerhorn, who again, I don't want to skip ahead, but I think he had a very different idea for what this movie would be from what Mike had, and I think the Cousins had very much a different idea too. And again, I'm not trying to throw stones at the Cousins because I think I love everything that they did in terms of their passion to put this project together. And so many people say that they're going to make a movie, and they just
These guys did it.
never can do it, and they did it. You can never take
Yeah.
that away from them. But I think at times they were just so excited to be there
Right.
that they probably didn't maybe put their foot down creatively and be like, no, listen, like this is kind of how we see it. And at
Right.
least then Mike and I would have known, like, all right, because look, as a writer, and we'll probably get into this more in like writing part two, but when you're a hired gun on a job, like sometimes, yeah, you can give your opinion, but like at the end of the day, you were hired to do a job. If somebody tells you to paint the wall a certain color, you
Sure.
can say, well, I think you should paint it this color. But the guy might be like, no, I want it this color. And you're going to have to paint it that color, and that'll be that.
Yeah.
So there was a little bit of that going on in the writing room. And ultimately, we ended up with a draft that I think you could argue was a little bit convoluted from the start. And, as much as we tried to reduce the mixing of the mojos, I think some of those mixed mojos ended up crashing into each other like a bad car wreck towards the end of the movie.
Let me give
Um,
an example, Tommy, because I actually reviewed some of the early drafts last night before the show, and I found a draft that I think I sent to you, like pretty happy about, and I was shocked at how long it was. It was like 115 pages or something, and that was much longer than I thought it would end up being. And I would say we're hoping more for 90 to 100 pages, not 115. And there was a huge element that was stressed to me as being important that I remember, which was the time elements of this story. That basically this is not per se a haunted house, but a house with a history, a bad history. Bad essence, bad vibes, bad things happen in this house that are passing through the generations. So a huge aspect of the story from my perspective that I was kind of being told by others was we want the 1955 stuff and then like the 2015 stuff. And it was very important, at least I thought, that be in there. And then I'm like, okay, well, we've got to have some bridge of the history. And some of that was there's one character that's back in the 1955 version as a child, and then he grows up to be in the 2015 version. I think that's what became the Nicholas character. Uh, but basically, there was a lot of stuff in the past, like the 1955 era, that because of
yeah,
budget restraints, and I get it, and I got it at the time, but the budget restraints, it was like, how do we film something from 1955, have it look authentic, and at the same time do this stuff? And I believe it was your decision, or at least you're the one that told me, that the idea became, let's make some hints towards the 1955 stuff in some flashbacks, but let's really concentrate on the here and now. The Amy Hunter character, played by the wonderful
well, I
Christina
think the big
Robinson.
thing, Mike, I think the big thing there, Mike, was just, we had such a tough time with, we had 12 days to shoot this movie.
Right.
So this one, normally I had been shooting movies on 15-day budgets, 15-day shooting schedules, rather. This budget was so tight that we had to cut it out. The first thing producers will tell you is like when you need to save money, you cut entire days from the shooting schedule. And that's
Yeah.
like how you really start cutting to the bone. And basically, I just realized that, like, number one, it's going to be tricky to pull off. Number two, we already have a script that's about 20 pages too long. So
Yep.
something's got to go. And I think, you just mentioned her, Christina Robinson, and we're going to get into casting in a minute, but I wanted to focus on the actors that, no offense to anybody else in the movie, but I wanted to focus on the name actors that, people would have known. So I figured, I made the executive decision to just spend more time on the quote on the names.
Sure.
Um, but let's talk a little bit about, we've got this script, we've got the funds, we've got our location. Now let's talk about casting.
Okay.
The very first person that was put together into this cast was, well, actually, it was you, Mike. Uh, part of Mike's deal for the
All right.
movie, and actors, be paying attention to this shit. Mike didn't invent this. Um, this was actually, one of those moves invented by a gentleman by the name of Sylvester Stallone.
Right.
But if you're gonna write something, hey, why not take a discount on the writing fee, like Mike did,
Yeah.
and say, listen, I'm gonna take a haircut on this writing fee, but you're going to guarantee me this role right here that I'm going to write for myself. And the cool thing is, Mike already played a part in the trailer, so the cousins were familiar with him. So it was one of those things where it just made a lot of sense. So the birth of Mike, aka one of the Baton brothers, was
Oli
born.
Bateman.
So yeah, so Ole, and that's why I think you have that Ole Anderson T-shirt, which you kind of creeped me out a minute ago when you like lowered your camera and but yeah, he's that's a weird shirt, Mike.
I want to give
Anyhow,
well, Adam Demoy, a subscribe to Mike Messier YouTube fan, sent me a box of goodies from a Conrad Thompson
oh,
podcast, and this is one of the gifts. So if Adam Demoy happens to watch this, I'm wearing the
no,
shirt
that's
he gave me.
lovely.
Yes.
We just love that, don't we? Um,
Yeah.
so getting back to casting, basically we had Mike in there, and we
Sure.
had again this really all centers around a young girl who's kind of just getting out of the hospital for some mental issues, trying to like have a normal weekend with her family. So Richard uh, had a connection to Christina Robinson, who was the little girl in Dexter, and she's all grown up now. And this was going to be like a really cool, edgy role for her. So Christina read the script and immediately kind of gravitated towards the role. And next thing you know, it we had Christina locked. And I can't say enough good things about working with Christina Robinson. She showed up on set, excited about the part. She actually got to live at the manor. That's kind of one of the fun things we'll get into a little bit later. But several cast members were actually staying at the manor, um, and ultimately, she did a lot with this role. This is kind of one of those characters where, not to give away too much, but we kind of see her almost turn into from a girl into a woman by the end of the film, and it's a really nice arc. And I think she played it really well, and she has a lot of emotionally distressing scenes that I think she handled really well. So, if anything, I think that although this movie might kind of have some that was weird moments in some of the performances at times, I think that Christina sort of acting as our quarterback for this one kept it grounded and in the right frame of mind. So shout out to Christina. I think she
Well,
did
yeah,
a
well
terrific
put.
job in this one.
Well put, Tommy. Christina was great. I think from her perspective, to carry a film as the lead character, which she is as Amy Hunter, that was probably great for her because on Dexter, she was basically the daughter of one of Dexter's girlfriends. And it wasn't a huge character, and that's okay. It was a great show on Showtime for many years. But for this, she's the main person, and she does have some great twists and turns and arcs. I do want to put over the manor too, Tommy, because the venue is no longer being used as it once was when we shot this film. It's changed ownership, but the couple that owned the home at the time that lived there, I believe they ran it as a combination bed and breakfast slash exercise, like yoga classes would happen in the backyard and stuff. So it
Yeah,
was
it
a
was a
great
it was a
venue.
unique it was a unique situation, and like Mike said, there were a couple of people. It was kind of weird because like there were a couple people like living in the building along with our cast and along with some of our crew. Some of them were friendly, and some of them were just a little bizarre. It was kind of like we were like, "Is this the horror movie within the horror movie with these
Yeah.
people?"
The neighbors didn't like us
But
either, from what I remember.
no, the neighbors didn't really like us.
No.
We can talk about. We'll get into that later. There's some fun stories there. But also, shout out to the people who allowed us to kind of live there for a month. They couldn't have been more gracious, and
Yeah.
we definitely, you always explain to people when they sign up for this how intense it is to have a movie on your property and what
Right.
it's like to see all the dozens and dozens of people and the dozens and dozens of cars and the trucks and all the equipment and all the gear and how the gear just explodes all over a location. There's shit everywhere.
Right.
People can't truly fathom that when they agree to let you shoot somewhere. And these people definitely got more than they bargained for, but they couldn't have been more gracious. And it's kind of a sad story. Rest in peace to, I believe, the owner, the gentleman who owned the place, passed away, and he was actually dying of cancer when we
Oh
shot
my
this
goodness.
movie. Yeah, and I remember it was kind of cool. Again, this is the healing power of entertainment. But I remember having some conversations with the woman, his wife, and she was actually like, "Oh, no." I was like, "Oh, I'm so sorry if, like, this is, like, imposing, if we're making a lot of noise and it's trying to be peaceful and private. I'm just trying to be as respectful as possible for the situation." And she was like, "Oh, no, this is, like, really, like, kind of fun for him, and it's entertaining, and it's cool that he gets to see all these people." And so, again, a situation where as, as kind of, annoying as it probably was at times, I think that it was also exciting. It was almost like the circus rolled into town for a little while, and it was kinda entertaining for the people that lived there.
And
But
not to get too spiritual, but from a perspective of he knows that the spirit of his home and his business are going to live beyond his years, and that his wife will have something to remember their time in the estate together. I'm not. I thought they had kids. I'm not sure, but if he did or didn't, the people that love
yeah,
this guy, will have this movie at least.
yeah, I remember them saying that too, because they were trying to sell the place for a while, and they didn't know the longevity of it. So, like Mike said, it's now forever ingrained in the manor. But let's keep going. There's a lot to talk about on this show, and we're just getting started with the cast. One of my go-tos for a lot of my movies, especially in the beginning of my career, uh, is of course the rock star, the lead singer of the band Godsmack, Sully Erna. Sully and I have been friends for a long time. We kind of met randomly when I was just an intern working with a local filmmaker, and the two of them collaborated on something. And I hadn't talked to Sully in a long, long time. And then I reached out to him on Army of the Damned. And if you go back and watch our Army of the Damned episode, which I believe is episode 3, you can hear a little bit more about that backstory there. But I remember just kind of immediately just thinking to myself, like, all right, we got Christina. Let's build this thing up, and I'm just going to surround this cast with people. Let's bring in a couple of aces that we know will show up. We'll have a built-in audience. We'll have a fan base. So Sully Erna was really the first person that I went to, and Sully, I remember giving him a call and being like, "Hey, man, do you want to play like this kind of crazy down home country boy who maybe has a southern accent, maybe he's a little bit of a hoot and hollering loudmouth, and he drinks a little too much, and he's on a little hunting trip that may or may not go sideways." And he
Brett
thought it was
Baton.
cool. Yeah, Brett Baton was the name, and Sully thought it was cool. He read the script. It was not like nothing he had ever done before, and a lot of people don't know this, but Sully's actually a little bit of a uh, y- you know I don't want to get you the wrong idea, but he knows his way around a firearm, and this character was kind of a just a gun-toting Southern boy who had a shotgun and beers, and uh, it was definitely some of the comic relief in the film. So Sully came in. I believe he worked. It might have been 2 days. It's kind of funny, actually. I think Sully was originally we were gonna try and like shoot everything in like either 1 or 2 days, and I remember he actually said, this was so gracious of him. He was like, "You know what, man? Fuck it. Like, you don't have to pay me any extra." He's like, "Let's do it over like 3 days. Let's do it right. Like, I don't want to rush through my stuff. Like, it's okay. Like, I don't expect you to pay me, for that third day." And I was like, "Wow, that's awesome. Thank you."
Classy guy.
And that's what, yeah, really classy guy. And again, I can't say enough about, you know, his level of professionalism, on time. treats everybody kindly. Very fucking funny guy. Great timing, and you get to have a lot of fun on this set. And I don't think that this is going to be on Sully Erna's highlight reel by any means in terms of some of his greatest moments. But I think Sully had a little bit of fun out there. I don't want to put words in his mouth, but I bet you if I was to call him right now and ask him, he'd probably have a big laugh and say, "Man, that was fucking nuts." So we had
Yeah.
a good time with Sully Erna, but let's just keep it moving along. One of the really cool characters and someone who I'm so excited that I got to work with is Rachel True. Mike, tell us a little bit about some of the movies you might. One of the what's the iconic movie that everybody knows Rachel True from?
It's a movie that I saw in the theater as a kid. Uh, the Craft, with four teenage girls getting involved in the wonderful world of witchcraft, and she's one of the four leads. She's one of these icon. I mean, this is the goth girls that we went to high school and college with, who used to go to Spencer's Gift. This was the soundtrack to their teenagehood, The Craft. And Feruza, I say her name wrong, Feruza Balk, who was a great 90s actress, beautiful woman, I think. She and Rachel, who looks great in this Craft. It's iconic. She's also done some series. I don't recall the name
Well,
off the top of my head, but
we'll
Rachel's been
stop
on
you there
series.
because yeah, I wanted to mention The Craft. That was the big thing. Like you said, Mike, just such an iconic film. I love how you said it. It's kind of the soundtrack of a lot of I wouldn't just say girls, man. I would say a lot of people in general. I know a lot of guys. I know a lot of people across the board who love that movie. It's so nostalgic. It's
Right.
like it's just 90s gold cinema.
It's up there with
And
Buffy
people
the
love it.
Vampire Slayer. Buffy the Vampire
Light
Slayer
light
is right up there
Light as
with
a feather,
Craft.
light as a feather. They have that whole bit where,
Yeah,
Rachel True, with some levitation going on. So
yeah.
I met Rachel on some random shit. This is a random case of happenstance where I'm promoting Almost Mercy. We're at a horror convention called Rock and Shock, and my booth happens to just be right next door to Rachel True's booth, just like that. And when you're doing a convention, you spend all day with these people right next to you, and it's like there's a lot of like, "Hey, I'm gonna go grab something quick. Can you watch my stuff or whatever?" That you get that little show camaraderie. So we
Sure.
just kind of hit it off, and it's always listen, if you're an actor or you're a director, directors and actors should always meet and shake hands, and uh, you know, that's kind of what ended up happening. At the end of the day, I remember kind of going over to Rachel and just saying, "Hey, it was really cool meeting you." And oh, you're on Twitter, and I remember she followed me on Twitter, and that was it. It was just kind of like, "Hey, yeah, maybe we'll do something down the road." There was this part that we had written for a psychologist that would kind of come in at the beginning of the film and be sprinkled in throughout the production, and it was one of those situations where again, Rachel True's a star in this genre. So on a production like this, we wouldn't be able to afford to bring her in for an extended period of time. But I knew that, like, hey, if we can shoot her out in one day and bring her in and make this worth her while, this is going to be something that she might be attracted to. So we you know did the old Twitter reach out, just shot her a message on Twitter and said, "Hey Rachel, I met you a little while back at Rock and Shock. Do you remember me? I've got the script. I'd love for you to take a look at it." And she responded to it really quickly. And I'd say in a matter of, I don't know, maybe a week or two of just kind of going back and forth with a couple of emails and then doing a phone call eventually, she agreed to do the project. So now we're building something. We're starting to build a little cast. We've got Christina Robinson, we got Sully Erna, we got Rachel True. Names are coming together.
Let me put something in for Rachel played Dr. Trivniak, which I basically based that character on a real life person from my own life. And with the change of the T came from a different, the real person had a different letter than T. So Trivniak was a tip of the hat to that individual. And it was actually written as a male character. And when you told me that you had cast Rachel, it took me a little while, but I'm like, hey, it doesn't have to be a male, which is kind of cool about having an open mind, and I'll give you credit for that. You did do some out of box casting for this one, and some of them really worked, and I think this one did. I think the Rachel True as Dr. Trivniak was a big hit. So I like that one.
Yeah, she was. Thanks, man. She was really great, and I loved working with her. And it's been a while, but I got to reach out to her again and just see what's up and touch base. And that's something that I think we forget to do sometimes in the industry. Just check in, say, hey, what's up? How you been?
I'll send her the show.
So Rachel, if you're listening, how are you? We miss you. So that was Rachel True, and then the next piece of casting had me very excited, and I have to give credit to David Gear on this one. Uh, David, as you know, we've mentioned him on previous shows. Kind of a jack of all trades in the movie world, but one of the things that he's sort of specializes in is unique pieces of casting and having a lot of relationships with, particularly a lot of professional wrestlers. So we were able to bring in Kevin Nash to play basically this cult leader, for lack of a better word. This kind of, very eccentric uh, leader of sorts. Mike, do you want to tell us a little bit about the True Believers and Kevin Nash's character?
Yeah, the True Believers were an interesting thing. I was thinking more like hardcore devout. What are those guys called? The people that come, the Jehovah's Witnesses. So when I was
Yes.
writing, why, Tommy? Now it's all coming together here. I actually had Jehovah's Witnesses coming to my apartment for about a year before this, and I had to tell them to stop coming. And I would bring them in, they would talk, and then I went online and I said like, how can you kind of refute Jehovah's Witnesses? And there was a website article that said, ask them these questions about the Bible and you'll put holes in all their stuff. And I did, and they didn't like it. But the point is, I wanted to represent that type of feeling in the movie. It was a little bit changed.
Yeah, and I think it changed. Yeah, it changed quite a
A
bit,
lot.
actually.
It became
Yeah, it's
more
more than a little
a
bit changed.
it became more of a hippy dippy cult, like kind of like and I
But
think
there's a
Kevin
reason
did
for that
great.
change. Yeah,
Kevin
there's a
did
reason
great.
for that change, and I want to get into that, Mike. The reason why the True Believers changed from this kind of creepy, borderline bizarre, we're not really sure who these people are, to a group of hippies that show up with like an ice cream cart and a party and are ready to celebrate and rejoice. And the reason was, all right, so remember, we made this movie with a lot of favors and a lot of regular Joes and Janes coughing up a couple bucks to make it happen. So there were a lot of favors that needed to be repaid. There were a lot of, hey, can you put my kid in the movie? I'll invest a little bit of money if you can give this person a cameo, or whatever. My cousin needs,
Right.
wants to be in the movie, or my daughter, or whatever. So that was a thing where suddenly, like, there were even, we had kids in that scene. Like, we had a really eclectic piece of casting. And I think, Mike, what you were talking about would have required a little bit more of like a very specific round of casting rather than just what we had was almost like it became almost like friends and family day on set, where it's
Yeah.
like, okay, let's wrangle up 25 random people to be these true believers. But like you said, Kevin Nash came in and really handled it and did a great job of kind of feeding off of the crowd.
Yeah.
Kevin plays sort of like this hippie pastor, kind of a cool rock and roll priest, rock and
Right.
roll preacher, if you
Right.
will. Um, and it was really a fun bit. And then I could tell, like, it's one of those things where we've heard this before, but like you could tell he was having fun doing it, and that really translated in the part. And I can't say enough great things about Kevin Nash. He's another guy that
If I
kind of
could
came
jump,
in and yeah, I was just gonna say, he kind of came in and did his thing in a really short period of time. I think he was on set for just 1 day, maybe
I
two.
think it was just,
But
it might have
again,
been
we
one or two.
just the one. Yeah, it might have been just the one, but he came in, he did his thing, and it was really great just to spend a little time with him and work on his character.
Let
What
me
were you gonna
fill
say,
in.
Mike?
Let me fill in the gaps for those that may not know the name Kevin Nash. He's been in the Magic Mike films. So if both of them, the first two Magic Mikes, he's the big guy. He's the guy that's 7 feet tall, one of Magic Mike's exotic dancers. As a matter of fact, I just saw Kevin Nash in another movie in the theaters recently. Um, Actually, a really good movie. But Kevin Nash was a WWF World Wrestling Federation champion for 10 months. from November of 1994 until the Survivor Series 1995. He was part of the New World Order of Wrestling. For wrestling fans, this guy is right up there. He's known for his shoot interviews, his comedic takes on things. He's been called Big Sexy. He's been called the world's largest comedian, I believe, by Raven and Mick Foley. He's a great presence. You've worked with him several times. I'm always impressed by Kevin Nash, whether he's on camera or off. And I think with this, Tommy, he was able, like you said, feeding off the crowd. Well, think about a pro wrestler who's feeding off the crowd, and his physical presence of being at his age still in awesome shape, 7 feet tall. The guy has a presence, and what's great about him is he knows how to pull it back. Like, he's a wrestler, but he can also act, and I think he did a great job with this.
Yeah, I agree, and I think Kevin's a really talented actor, and you know, he's one of the. There's a group of pro wrestlers out there that are, you know, kind of have cracked that uh, that line of they're looked at as actors and not just as, oh, we need a big guy to play this part. You know, they're actually perceived as somebody who can put in a really great performance, and that's what Kevin did. And like Mike said, I mean, the guy's fucking gigantic. I mean, really, like, you know, you can't really imagine how big someone who's, you know, basically 7 feet tall is. Like, that is just so huge that, you know, I'm not a short guy, and even Mike, you know, Mike's a pretty tall guy. Mike, what are you, 6'1", 6'2"?
I'm 6'2.5", and so I have a
Yeah,
scene where
yeah. So
me and Nash kind of bump heads a little bit. So yeah, he's an
yeah,
intimidating
it's like
guy.
if you're 6'2.5", the thing about that is like when you're next to Kevin Nash, you're still looking straight fucking up at him.
Yeah,
So
yeah,
he's really enormous. But you know, certainly not a guy that I would mess with, but he's definitely a, you know, has that gentle giant sense to him too, where he's just very sweet and kind to people on set. And I can't say enough great things about Kevin. My only regret is that we didn't have him in the movie more.
right.
I wish we could have, you know, did more with his character. And you know what? I have a feeling that Kevin and I will be working together down the road one of these days. But let's keep going along here. You know, so then we had a lot of our, I guess you could say, the usual suspects. You know, this is again a movie where I was bringing in a lot of people that I knew could come in and deliver a performance. So we had people like Danielle Goulden came in, and Danielle and I have worked together in a lot of movies. We're going to talk about Almost Mercy, which is one of my favorite movies that I made. Danielle's the star of that movie. Danielle came in and played this very kind of it was a really fun character. Mike, tell us a little bit about Danielle's character and what she did.
Yeah, when I watched this last night, Tommy, I was really seeing star quality once again from Danielle, and she's really a presence in this. She had no fear as far as the sexiness of the character, with, you know, not a revealing outfit, but kind of revealing, a very sexy outfit. And she played Blaine, who's the cousin of Christina's character of Amy Hunter. So she's Blaine Clark, and she has a brother named Trevor, and they're kind of like these siblings that are always kind of in each other's business. Like, they're a little too, they know each other's secrets, the brother and sister. And was it Mike Cicero was the brother, Trevor?
Mike Zuccolo, buddy,
Mike
come on.
Zuccolo. Yeah, Mike Zuccolo. So Danielle is really a force of nature. She has some great scenes with Mike Bennett, who's a pro wrestler who actually, I think we got a better character out of him than the WWE did, to be quite honest, because Mike, I think, is very good as Darsaw Bateman. Kind of
Yeah,
a big
Mike's
there's three Bateman brothers.
yeah, Mike's really great in this movie, and kind of again, you know, lets loose and is able to have fun and gets to play. Those Bateman brother characters were just fun characters to play. I mean, they were kind of reckless and loud and raising hell in every scene that they're in, just about. So it was great to work with Mike. Mike's also, you know, being a pro wrestler. We've talked about this before, but they can handle the stunts. They can
Right.
handle, you know, a little bit of tussling if they have to. So Mike had a pretty cool fight scene in this movie that, you know, I think people might enjoy, especially Mike Bennett fans out there that follow his wrestling career. So definitely check out Mike. We talked a little bit about Mike Zuccolo. Uh, Mike is a really talented guy that kind of, he's one of those actors that finds his way into almost every movie that I end up doing. I find a part for him because I love working with him. I love his timing. I love what he does. He's got this like kind of almost has like a I'm sorry, a Daniel Stern kind of quality to him
Yeah,
that I've always
absolutely.
kind of appreciated. But yeah, Mike did a great job again playing opposite Danielle as these just two, bickering family
Siblings.
members, bickering siblings back and forth. Um,
If I
and
could
of
say
course, we
something,
got to.
sure, good.
Yeah, I was just going to go along. We got a chance to work with Tanya Lynch on this one,
Yep.
who I've worked with. Again, there were a lot of uh, people that we brought back in from Almost Mercy, which, at this time, Almost Mercy had only been shot probably a couple of years prior. So I was still kind of, these people were all fresh on my radar at the time. So Tanya Lynch was really great. She came in and played Christina Robinson's mom.
Right.
That kind of tries to help guide her through this wacky weekend and this family reunion gone horribly bad. And then we had some new additions too. This is a movie that I got a chance to work with Armin Garrow for the first time.
Oh, he was great.
Armin Garrow was very, very talented. He's an actor who's been in. I mean, he's been directed by Martin Scorsese. He was in The Sopranos,
It's in Coda
and
that won
since
an
then,
award. Yep.
yep, he was just coming off of Coda, which was an Academy Award Best Picture. So we got a chance to work together for the first time, and there's actually this sort of like a poem of sorts that Mike had written into the movie that I thought was really cool. And Armin read it and he said, "Hey, can I turn that poem into a song? What do you think about that? I've been kind of working on it, and what do you think?" And he does it for me over the phone, and I hear the song, and I'm like, "That's one of the coolest things I've heard in a long time." I was like, "Absolutely, we're gonna do that. That's so fucking cool." And it was just like one of those things where once I heard it, I was like, "Wow, we're gonna kind of sprinkle this song into the whole movie," and it became like a really nice vibe. So Armin's a guy who, again, I think he's another guy who only worked for one day on the movie. You're gonna see that was a trend because when you're working a 12-day shoot, there's
Right.
a lot of those kind of like you're in and you do your scenes and you're out. So Armin Garrow came in, nailed his role, and it was very memorable. And Mike was talking earlier about those flashback scenes to the 50s.
Right.
Armin's a big part of those flashback scenes, so
Well,
he's got a
yeah.
really great look
Basically,
too.
he plays the young Nick. Nicholas is in the modern. Nicholas is the character that runs the manor in 2015. Let's just call it 2015. And in the flashbacks, he's played by, I believe, Mark Sullivan's son in real life, if I have that right.
It's
And
neat.
that kid playing, his real life father's character at a younger age, which worked. And then sitting across from him is Armin Garrow, who's playing the father of Nicholas. And so by the time 2015's come and gone, the father has since passed away. But we experience these flashbacks. To be honest, from my memory, really the only thing kind of that held from the time break, version of the story was Armin's scenes. And I happened to come to the set. I didn't work on the day that Armin worked. I just happened to come by the set for the free catering and to say hi to everybody. And I got to
Right.
witness the tail end of Armin doing his scene. And I'm telling you, Tommy, everybody was clapping every time he did this scene. Everybody was, I've never seen a crew as enjoying an actor performance like this. And so that made me, and I had been to an Armin Garrow speech, believe it or not. I saw Armin Garrow perform a speech about acting. And this really made me a bigger Armin Garrow believer than I already was.
Well, that's cool, man. I didn't know that you had a little experience watching him before that. And yeah, Armin's a guy that at the time I was really excited to work with. A little known fact: I wanted Armin to be in Army of the Damned, and it just didn't work out for whatever reason. We wasn't able to we weren't able to make that happen, but we were able to make this happen. So it was great to have him in there. Another actor that I got a chance to work with for the first time that I had kind of wanted to for a while was Eric Lutz. Eric Lutz had been in, he's Rhode Island's a small state, and there's not a lot of people that have kind of like gone on. Well, I shouldn't say that, but there's a smaller list of people that have gone on to do big things than a lot of other states because we are such a small place. And Eric went on to have some really great success. He was on a hit show called Caroline in the City. Was a main character in that, and had a great career, and lived in Los Angeles for a while, and had come back to Rhode Island. And I got in touch with him and had this really cool part that I wanted to offer to him, and we were able to make it work. And it was one of those things where, again, this wasn't a big budget movie. And Eric was basically willing to kind of like, work at a rate that probably wasn't the best rate on the planet, just because he wanted to kind of start that relationship with me as a
Right.
filmmaker. And that's kind of how you build relationships. We talked about this in some of our past episodes. And guess what? About a year or two later, I told you earlier when I was working on Anders Manor, I'm sorry, I call it Anders Manor because that was the working title. But while I was working on the Manor, I was also writing and producing Vault, getting that movie off the ground, and trying to
Right.
prep that and build it. So it's one of those things where obviously it made perfect sense. Eric Lutz went on to play a character by the name of Buddy Barrington in Vault. So we built our little relationship on the set of the Manor, and he's a guy that since then I worked with a couple times. So shout out to Eric Lutz.
Caroline in the City starred Leah Thompson, for those that are playing along with the home version of And Action tonight.
Yeah, it was a really big show. I'm pretty sure, I'm not 100%, but I think it was. And 90s kids out there will know what I'm talking about. I believe Caroline in the City was like the sandwich show in between that fateful 8:30 time slot where it was part of NBC's must see TV on Thursday nights, which of course is legendary for. On Thursday nights at 8 o'clock, you had Friends, which obviously I don't need to tell y'all what an iconic show that was.
Right.
And then at 9 o'clock, you had Seinfeld, which, in my opinion, is the greatest television show of all time. And in the middle, it's a very crucial time period for two reasons. Because number one, you don't want anybody to change the channel. You
Right.
want them to stay there for Seinfeld after they watch Friends. Number two is a crucial spot because it's like, think of all the eyes you have on you.
Yeah.
You're literally right in between these two juggernauts, these two legendary shows.
You're sandwiched.
So for many years, Caroline in the City was right in between the two most iconic television shows of all time, you could argue. So a lot of people saw that show, and Eric
Yes.
was right in the mix.
Yes, he
He
was.
played I think he played like the quirky neighbor.
Right.
So it was cool to work with Eric. I'm just going to go down the list. Tandy Tugwell played a kind of a really fun character. You
Eric's
have
wife.
Yep, and she was kind of just, there for the drinks and the good times. Mark Sullivan, we talked about him briefly, but he played like the caretaker of the manor, and it was one of those kind of it's one of those characters
Nicholas.
that kind of yeah, Nicholas has a little bit of a dark history. And I think that, again, Mark Sullivan's a really talented actor. He's got this real a lot of bass in his voice, and he's a very big, imposing character, and he's got a really cool look. And I enjoyed working with him and just kind of just chatting with him. It's one thing it's nice when you have talented actors, but it's nice when you can have a conversation with them in between setups. And Mark is definitely a very educated guy and fun to chat with. Um, let's talk a little bit about the man behind the Akamana. You're gonna say Akamana? What the fuck is that? Well,
I'm still
Akamana
saying
is
that.
the name. Yeah, I think. Listen, that name wasn't Mike's favorite name, and frankly, I don't know if it was mine either. But Akamana is the name of the demon in this story.
Yeah.
So Akamana was a character that was kind of, again, we decided let's cut out all the mixed mojos and let's focus just on this one demon character that lives inside of Christina
Right.
Robinson's mind, basically. So this is probably a good chance we'll talk a little bit about David, but then we can segue into the crew because the design and the look of Akamana was very unique. But basically, Akamana was a demon played by David Tessier, and he was kind of this like almost like darkly fun. We tried to give it like this Freddy Krueger vibe, where if you're a fan of the Nightmare on Elm Street movies, you'll know that Freddy Krueger, although he's vicious and evil, he's kind of a ball buster, and he kind of, he's
Right.
got this like twisted sense of humor. Like as he kills people, he kind of toys with them. So,
He's like Mr. Roper
uh,
from Three's Company, looking to camera and telling a funny joke every once in a while. Yeah, that's Freddy
yeah, he
Krueger.
like almost yeah, he mugs the camera and breaks the
Right.
fourth wall.
Robert Englund.
So David did a great job with that, and he's just a natural performer, a great musician. He was fun to work with. I haven't seen him in a while, so shout out to David Tessier. I hope all is well with him. Um, but yeah, this is a great time to kind of segue into the crew. And I guess we should start right at the top of the crew with none other than Jonathan Schermerhorn. So we'll talk about John Schermerhorn, and listen, this is one of those things where I told you before I made a lot of mistakes on this movie, and this is probably one of them. And I'm not saying that in a derisive manner towards Jonathan Schermerhorn, because I think that it's my fault that I didn't just say early on, you know what, I'm going to direct this movie myself. It's probably one of those things where it all pointed in the direction that I should have just taken the movie and kind of told the story myself. I had been in the writing room, I knew the cousins, I knew the camera very well at that point, was kind of developing my craft. But I'll say this, and this is on me. I was probably a little too high on myself at the time. And I felt as though coming off of Almost Mercy and with having Vault lined up, I don't really need to direct a small horror movie at this point. I felt as though it would be me taking a step backwards. I felt
Right.
as though I don't have the budget, I don't have the people power, I don't have what it takes to make this movie what I deemed in my mind a Tom DeNucci film at the time. Uh, and it was a little bit of arrogance, and if you ask me, it was just stupid because at the time I didn't have that kind of career where I could be turning things down. It would have been a great opportunity for me to learn. It would have been a great opportunity for me to see what kind of story I can tell up against some challenges. But again, I was very busy. In my defense, I was thinking a lot about Vault. I had my hands on a couple of different plates of pie, and it was one of those things where I just decided to bring somebody in. And also, I think I was trying to just produce. I wanted to see what it was like to just produce a movie. Be a little less hands-on in the creative and be a little more hands-on in the putting together all the pieces. So I brought in Jonathan Schermerhorn, who had been my first AD on many projects. If you don't know what a first AD is, we'll briefly go over that. They're basically the assistant director, and we've talked about it on other shows, but again, just to sum it up, they're the person in charge of making the schedule. They're the person in charge of keeping the entire day on time and keep you moving and making your days and covering all the pages on each respected call sheet that you got to shoot on a daily basis. So John had been my first AD on two movies, on Army of the Damned and Almost Mercy. And I remember telling him, I gave him my word early on. He told me that, well, I want to AD, but I really want to direct. And I remember telling him, like, well, hey, man, you help me out. You do your thing with me on a couple of projects, and I'll do everything in my power to try and give you that opportunity when the time comes. And I try to be a person of my word as much as I can and hold true to that. And I really wanted to. I told him that I would hook him up if I could. And I found
Right.
myself in a position where I'm like, no, you know what? I'm going to produce. I'm going to bring John in to direct. I was a little immature at the time, and I'm not afraid to say that I probably made it really hard for him to do his job because again, it's like you can't take that tiger out of you can take the tiger out of the cage, but he's still going to
Right.
be a tiger. And in my mind, like I was just a director. So like I did probably second guess him a lot. I did probably put him in a lot of situations where I questioned what he was doing in front of people when I shouldn't have. And again, I'm not trying to defend what I did or my behavior, but like that was just me, like, again, I should have just directed the movie, and I was probably internally fighting that, and again, like,
Right.
I probably, like, if I could say one of my biggest mistakes on this movie was if I was committed to having John direct, I should have just kinda given him the ball and run with it, and I think early on, he felt kind of frustrated that he didn't have enough opportunity to kinda put his creative stamp on it. Um,
Right.
and again, this all goes back to a lot of cooks in the kitchen and all that stuff. But it was a little bit of a rocky back and forth at times. I have a lot of respect for John because he did work hard to get to his position, but I think I was more like fighting myself than anybody else in that whole exchange.
He's a military veteran too, right? John Sherm.
John was in the army. Yeah, he did serve in the army.
Yeah, so I,
Yep.
of course, have inherent respect for anyone who served our country. And so thanks to Sherm. And the funny thing is, I have a pretty good history with Sherm. You know, Sherm, many times that I did extra work or even stunt work once on the TV show Brotherhood that filmed in Providence, Sherm was the guy, you know, kind of working for those productions and helping me. And I remember one time I got stuck in Boston traffic and got to a film set an hour late, and Sherm was in charge of checking people in, and he talked to me about it, and he was firm but fair. So I always respected Sherm. From my perspective, Tommy, you know, the first AD is what I like to think of as the bad cop. It's the it might be tougher than being a director because the director is kind of, you know, vaulted, so to speak, and put on this prestige, and
Right.
everyone has an inherent respect. It's Mr. Director, and let's have a name on his chair, and let's get him his water. But the first AD has to be the tough guy who's the bridge between creative and, you know, producers, director, and the cast. And if there's extras, sometimes, you know, the first AD is really in the hot seat. And Sherm had done that job for you a couple of times. I don't know if he did the Slimebuck short film as well, but he
He
always
did.
came through for you. And I think the situation, as you explained it, makes a little bit more sense to me now that you had made this promise to him years earlier. You were kind of caught between two major projects, Almost Mercy and Vault. And it kind of became a decision of convenience in a sense, like, hey, I'm kind of iffy if I want to direct this Manor movie. And at one point, I made a promise to my friend Sherm that I'd help him direct a film if I ever had the opportunity. Why not kill two birds with one stone, you know? And I can get out of the director spot and give it to him. But then, as you just admitted to, you kind of did a little bit of shadow directing, you know, which is what I would call when there's a director, but there's like an overlord. You know, there's like the boss and then the end boss. And you were kind of, and I saw that happen just once, to be honest with you, that I experienced. It wasn't that big a deal, but when I experienced it as an actor on the actual set of you kind of shadowing over Sherm and disagreeing with something he was doing, and he actually acquiesced to you, and it turned out for the best. It was a very simple thing. It was the position of the three brothers as we entered the manor. I think like I was in the center, and that's how Sherm had me, and you wanted Sully in the center because he was the shortest and also kind of the leader. And I thought of Sully as like the Michael Hayes of the Freebirds, and like, you know, so I just felt like there was some tension there that manifested later on in the shooting process, like not day 9 or 10 or something. But I did know that before this movie, you and Sherm were very tight, and it was kind of like the He-Man Man at Arms type relationship. I don't know how it stands now, but Sherm's a good guy. And like I said, he's a guy that served our country, and he's a guy that served many film projects in New England. So give him credit for that.
Yeah, I agree. I agree. And like a lot of things in this business and other businesses, you work with people, and then sometimes time goes by. And I haven't seen Sherman in a long time, but I wish him nothing but the best. I do appreciate all the effort that he has, put in over the years to kind of help me tell my stories and help live some of my dreams. Can't ever take that away from him. And like you said, man, I mean, he was banging around back when they really kind of just started making movies. And that kind of early 2000s movie boom. Sherm was right in the middle of that, so he certainly put his time in. And I'm proud of the fact that he was able to get to direct a movie, which there's a lot of people out there that start out as a production assistant and aspire to do that, and they just never do. I mean, it's very uncommon, frankly. So, good for Sherm for getting to that point, and he earned that spot. Um, and like I said, in hindsight, I probably should have just directed this movie long before I even brought Sherm on. That was just me kind of not really understanding that I could have directed this, and it's okay for a director to make a movie that's one budget and then go and make a movie that's a slightly less budget. Nobody's going to judge you for that. It's all about telling a story and getting experience. So let's move on. We talked about this demon Akamana, really cool makeup design by Julie Lachane, who came in and basically was the engineer of our demon. And this was not an easy makeup to apply. It took a long time. It was one of those things where basically, you know, there were like hands. Akamana had hands that needed to be
Right.
done.
Yeah.
His skin was colored a certain way. The original Akamana was actually completely naked and just had like a little, like kind of like a loincloth deal. It's kind of creepy. Um, we decided, you know what, to paint that body every time, like to paint the whole body, it's just gonna be too costly and it's gonna be too time consuming, frankly. So then we decided to give Akamana basically like a 70s kind of like creepy, weird suit, almost like Beetlejuice. And then we just did the hands and we did the face. So it was very time consuming. I don't want to give an exact quote, but I want to say it was at least an hour or two in the chair every day that he got there.
Yeah.
And I remember the unique thing, and this is no knock to Julie. I mean, this was a low budget film, and we only had enough money for a certain amount of materials. But the Akamana face started to just like deteriorate over time. It's latex, it's
Yeah.
latex. It's being put on and it's being reapplied every night and taken off.
Right.
And it's molded to the face. And basically, the sweat over time
Hmm.
makes that latex just like almost disintegrate and just start to
Yeah.
peel and rip. So I remember like the last day we had Akamana, she came up to me. She was like, "Man, this thing is just like not gonna last much longer. I'm just telling you. Like I can kind of." And she did a great job of it. You can't really tell in the movie, but she had to almost like piecemeal pieces of it back onto his face.
Yeah.
Because like if he moved too fast, like the whole thing might just come right off. So Julie Lachane did a great job with that one.
Yeah.
Um, Ali Malillo was the production designer on this movie,
Yeah. That's
and
great.
with the help of Alex Napawaki, the art department was very strong on this one. Ali built an entire set. I mean, the coolest thing Ali did in this movie was, and I'd love to maybe post some photos. Eventually, that'll probably be something that we can do as the show develops. But Ali built an entire set, total build out of this kind of psychiatrist office, which looked like a very traditional
Oh yes.
psychiatrist office, but then it had an observation window and it was this like kind of almost like a padded cell type of a look. It was
Right.
Christina Robinson's cell within her room at the hospital. So Allie built this thing out. It was amazing. Like the production office in East Greenwich, where Verdi Productions is based out of, is Chad was nice enough to allow me to build this set there and basically shoot for just one day. But this set was unbelievable. So if you watch this movie and you see the psychiatrist's office where Rachel True is, that's a set that was completely designed and built by Ali Malillo, and you'd never know it. I mean, it's a really unbelievable job she did. And the fucking set took up the entire office. Like I remember it
Right.
was as if like the construction just blew up. And shout out to all the cool people, like a friend of mine, Sparky, his name we call him Sparky, but his name's Jared. Jared Sparky Marmot, um, Don Martone. I had a lot of friends that kind of came that day and just swung a hammer and banged nails for free, just to
If
get this thing built for us.
I can attest to that, Tommy, because I think I was called to the production office to pick up a script or do something for the movie related to the movie. And I just basically had to show up for 5 minutes and leave. And when I got there, I see Sherm, the director, swinging a hammer. I see Glenn of the two cousins. What are the cousins' last names again, Tommy?
Glenn Jeffrey and Matt O'Connor.
Yes, thank you, because I felt bad we haven't said that. So Glenn is swinging a hammer. Allie's, basically not ordering people around. That's not her personality, but she's directing traffic, so to speak.
Sure.
But Sherm is swinging a hammer, and at the time, I think like I actually had it on my mind, like, man, this script has really changed. What's going on here? But when I saw people swinging hammers, and I wasn't swinging a hammer, nobody asked me to. I was like, I'm pretty impressed. Like, I can't. How am I going to have some what I would call actory bullshit at this moment when these people are literally sweating and swinging hammers and making this thing of which I helped
For free.
create in the writing process, right? Yeah. So I give you credit, Tommy, that you've always, since I've known you, you've always had some really great relationships with people that tend to come through for you, and I'm sure you appreciate them. And you do give back to people. You host parties or whatever to show your appreciation. And I think this is one of those things where your, extended family of friends, so to speak, as well as the cousins' extended family of friends, they all kind of came through. It was like it takes a village to make a movie. And from my own kind of enlightenment and perspective, Tommy, I do feel like that's something I have not done. I haven't take that kind of communal, open-hearted approach to things. Like I kind of, me and my same buddy Tim always end up shooting together. He's my DP editor. I'm very comfortable with him. He's kind of a one-man gang for my production crew. There's certain actors that I used to always run auditions, and I still do when I'm making something. But I always like in later years I started to go to the same people and over again. And I think that there's always lessons to be learned in different ways of doing things.
Yeah, I think so. I appreciate that, Mike. I think that it's one of those elements where like people really love this stuff. They do. And if you can catch them at the right time when they have a little bit of extra availability, you might be able to get someone to donate 3, 4, 5 hours of their time to help you do something. If it's fun and you position it the right way and they see, I feel like sometimes like hard work is contagious, and when people see you working hard at something, they kind of get excited and want to know how they can help out and get involved too, and lend you some of their hard work for your troubles. And that was kind of the case here, and um, it was fun, man. I mean, it was almost like that day almost reminded me like a bunch of kids getting together to like build a tree house or build like a fort in the woods. It was a
Right.
very kind of light environment, but and to Allie's credit, like you said, working as like the foreman for the whole thing, they they got that thing up and running. It looked terrific.
Yes.
So we'll just keep moving along. We have our boy Chester. Chester did costumes for this movie, and I've worked with Chester before many times, and it was really cool to work with him. Um,
Cool guy.
Again, yeah, Chris Brown, Joe, our sound guy. He's one of those dudes who's made every movie with me since my first one, Self Storage. Um, the lighting was really cool in this movie, so shout out to Chris Brown and Brad Peach. They worked really hard. They worked really hard to kind of to put this look together, and we did a lot of day for night in this movie. If you're not familiar with what day for night is, that's basically when uh, it's going to be nighttime outside, but we're going to make it look like the daytime inside. Or if it's going to be daytime outside,
Right.
we're going to make it look like the nighttime inside. So we had to manipulate the lighting environments a lot, and they did a great job with that. Um, Robbie Savage was involved in this project. Ryan Sweeney was involved in this project, and
Yep.
so was Sam Eilerson. And this was actually, I've worked with Ryan so many times since this project, but this was actually Ryan's first time on the movie. And he learned a lot on this one. I think if you ask him, he'll say that it was probably a bit of a proving ground for him. It was his first time DPing a film, and he was lucky enough to have Sam Eilertson there, who kind of, at the time, Sam was a little bit of a veteran behind the camera, and he had already shot some movies and kind of helped them out quite a bit. Um, but it was an awesome team, and I'm proud of what everybody did. Bobby Brierly was our boom operator. Um, I might be missing some people, and if I am,
Was
forgive me.
was my friend Chris Boylston in on this one? Did he work on this one?
I think he might have been somewhere in there, but uh, and action isn't about reading the credits to a movie.
Correct.
We we,
Why'd
we
you
we do
start?
appreciate all the help. But there were just a few people that I wanted to give shout outs to for some of the extra attention. Pamela, is it Pamela Morgan, I believe, uh, came in as both a producer and
The
played
nurse.
a nurse in
Right.
this. So we had some people,
Yes.
Tanya Lynch, also same thing. She was an actor in the movie and also was a producer. And that's because these people, had a major contribution behind the scenes. When they weren't acting, they were helping us out make this movie.
Joe
So there were quite a
Cantor,
few
the
people.
sound mixer.
Yep, we talked a little bit about Joe. He's Old Faithful. Um, but let's kind of segue into. We talked a little bit about our cast. We talked a little bit of our crew. Let's talk about what we like about this movie, and let's talk about what we don't like about this movie. Some of the challenges, some of
Sure.
the kind of the great things that happen. Mike, what do you think at the end of the day after a viewing? What'll kind of go down as some of the strengths, and what do you think will kind of go down as some of the weaknesses?
I feel like, Tommy, that there's two different aspects to that answer, and one of them is the experience of working on this production, and the other one is the actual finished movie. I'll take on the finished movie right now first, and because that's probably a little bit quicker. I think that the music is very strong in the Manor.
Shout out to David Bateman.
He did a great job. I just saw a horror movie in the theater the other day, the remake of Firestarter, and the music was great in Firestarter. I think the music's great in the Manor, and they're kind of that same genre. And I thought the music was great. There's three. I counted three um, montages in this movie that are basically, it's a technique that actually most people say it started with Citizen Kane. Citizen Kane, the cinematic montage where you put a lot of information. And I think that from the time I saw a rough cut of this film, which was pretty rough, to the premiere and then the same movie version I watched last night at home, you guys, you and the editor Sam, really did a hell of a job with these photo montages, and I
Thank you.
love them.
Yeah, I appreciate that. I appreciate that. Uh, Quick interjection on that. That was a Sam and I had, realized that when we were in the editing room on this, that we were going to have to utilize what we had in such a way that it appears to be more like we shot more than we really did. Because remember,
Right,
this was only a 12-day shoot. So one of the things that we did was we took a page out of the movie Vertigo, and in the movie Vertigo, there's there's quite a few of these really cool, fast-paced, hard-cutting montages, and they're kind of like these dream sequences. And we have a lot of nightmares in this movie and flashes to imagery and visions. So we took a page out of the Vertigo book and we cut together these like really, some of them. I mean, there's probably hundreds of cuts in some of these sequences. They're very methodically done. So I appreciate you saying that, Mike. And I was going to say that in the strength line, I would say that some of those sequences where we really kind of have, like you said, machine gun fire information,
right.
rapid fire kind of stuff coming out, and we're allowed to feel something. I think that those are the scenes that really hit. I think that some of the photography is really nice. There's some scenes that take place, like for example, there's like a dining room scene where Mark Sullivan's like carving up a roast. And I think some of those shots, within the dining room of the manor are really like well photographed and some time was taken. I think there's an element with these chess pieces that were really cool that are kind of staggered throughout the building. And
Yeah,
there's a really cool scene where Christina Robinson comes upon her kind of this like eerie birthday cake that's like almost written in blood, but it's not. And that's a cool little element of production design. So there are a lot of little details in this. And again, I'm not just saying it because it's my own movie, but the more movies you do, especially on these smaller budgets, you realize the effort that goes into them just to accomplish anything.
right.
And I think that the effort was certainly put out there. One kind of interesting thing to mention, well, we talked about strengths. I think we should talk about some weaknesses now, and that's going to segue into we had to do some reshoots on this movie, so I definitely want to talk about that before we go. But the weaknesses are, I just think that the tone itself was a little convoluted at times. I think that sometimes the performances were a little convoluted, and I'm not saying that the performances were bad, so don't take that the wrong way. I don't really think there were a ton of bad performances. I just think that sometimes some characters seemed like they were in a different movie, if that makes sense. It's like I think
Yeah, it
some
does.
characters were a little bit leaning more on the camp side of horror, and I think other characters were leaning more on the side of legitimate, slow burn, frightening traditional horror. So and again, if you're gonna make a horror comedy, you gotta come right out with it and really lean on it. You can't have these elements of, back and forth where it's like we're gonna be serious but then we're going to be light, and then we're going to be serious, then we're going to be kind of campy. So I feel
Well,
like a lot
well,
of
let's
that probably goes back to the beginning, the scripting process. You had four people, and then of course a fifth person entered the writing room, and I
sure.
think that that really did kind of end up being apparent.
Well, I would add to that, just from my own perspective, that you can't really, not you, but anybody can't blame the actors. Because, first of all, if you're one actor, you can't control the acting styles of the other cast members. So if you're playing it for laughs or for,
No, and you might
hey,
not even know, not to cut
right,
you off, but you
yeah.
might not have even been there that day that they were filming the other scenes.
I think what we're getting at is there was a little, not a little, but probably a lot of vagueness with the tone of this film going in. We did, I speak for everybody, I guess, but didn't quite know, are we making a schlocky 80s tribute horror, or are we making something more serious and down to earth type of thing? And I think maybe that when people don't have clarity in the vision, the natural thing to do is just make stuff up for yourself. I remember one situation on the set where I was given direction with my two Baton brothers that we were the representation of rape culture in America, and that was our direction. And I'm like, well, wait a minute. I mean, I was part of the writing of these characters. I never thought about that. And
Yeah, that's
furthermore,
bizarre. I don't remember that either.
yeah,
And
well, that I do. I mean, that was Sherm took the three of us aside into one of the bedrooms and told us that, and I'm trying to get. And then later, it was kind of revealed that from Sherm's perspective, this entire story is through the demented mind's eye of Amy Hunter and what she's been through. So that rape culture in America stuff makes sense if knowing that. But the problem was when we were told that we were rape culture in America, that those are our characters, we didn't get that additional bit of knowledge that through the perspective of Amy. So most
yeah, I think that
it was just a weird thing, and it's kind of like, how do we act that? And there was no direction. Like, how do we accomplish the goal of which you've just given to us in literally 10 seconds from when you're telling us to when we're on set again? And I think the answer is we didn't. We just kind of went back to what we were doing and ignored them. And that's not good for a director actor relationship when the direction is so out there that it's like, I can't even process what you're telling me, so I'm going to ignore you. That goes to what you're saying of the devaluing of the director position, and it's not fair to Sherm or fair to anybody, but that's just the situation that occurred.
right. Well, I think that it's again we can sum it up with I think that there was a serious miscommunication between the several writers on the project and the director, and there was a lot of going in different directions all at once.
Yeah,
And if you strap a rope to all of your limbs and to four horses, and you ask them all to pull, they're all going to go in a different direction, and your limbs are going to get ripped off. And that's kind of what happened to our story a little bit.
that's
The
a better
limbs,
horror movie. That's a good horror movie,
yeah,
Tommy.
yeah, the
That's a
limbs got
little,
a little ripped off with this one.
jeez.
But let's talk a little bit about
Oh boy,
let's talk a little bit about Gina and Gianna, who came on to do makeup and hair for us.
sure.
Uh, they were really terrific on this movie. They kind of work as a team, and they did their best to do some like practical effects, some traditional horror effects. But the truth is, and this is my fault, this isn't their fault. As a producer, I should have built more of those traditional horror effects in, and I didn't. I kind of just assumed that we'd be able to pull it off on set, and it didn't end up happening that way. And we finished the movie. We showed our distributor, who actually Lionsgate eventually ended up picking this up, but
Which
at the
is
time it
huge.
was the company that it was the time that at the time it was the company that was kind of just repping the movie. They watched our rough cut and they were like, "Yo, this is a horror movie, and you don't have a lot of like classic horror scenes like gore, blood, guts, whatever." So the company that did that mash deal with us put together a small bit of funding, and we made a very kind of concise, tight, one-day shoot where we shot basically a bunch of gore scenes, a bunch of kind of really graphic blood and gut stuff. And while we're at it, we were also able to shoot an additional scene with Mike Bennett, an additional scene with Danielle Golden, and basically just kind of add a little bit of meat to the bones in the right places, particularly with this gory scene, which was really cool. Chelsea Vale, an actor slash producer who we've worked with many times in the past. Um, Chelsea was in this scene where we basically utilized this really cool effect where we kind of envision Mike just suddenly like snap and attack this woman, and then it turns out that it's all in her head and it's not actually really happening. Um, and I believe John Del Ponte came down and helped us that day as well. You hear that name quite a bit on this show.
JDP, yeah.
So shout out to John who came down with the fire extinguisher full of blood to do this effect.
Oh yeah,
Um,
that was great.
yeah, it was very messy. So needless to say, we got those traditional horror elements into the movie. But again, that was probably one of the weaknesses too. Like if I could really shine a light on it, I look at myself as a producer and this has been a good episode for me to kind of admit some wrongs and where I kind of should have focused on some different areas a little bit better. And one of those areas was it's a lesson for a lot of producers out there. You know, it's kind of funny, I'll be candid. At the time, although this was one of the smallest budgets that I'd ever worked on, at the time, this was probably the most money that I've ever gotten paid to make a movie. This was a budget that, remember, I kind of had my fingers all over it. So, what I agreed to pay myself on this movie, uh, you know, and granted, I worked on it for a long time, and there's all these hours of work that people don't see when you're not on set, when you're on
Sure.
phone calls at 7 a.m., when you're fielding emails at midnight. So in my mind, I wanted to work myself a handsome rate. And it's one of those things where, yes, this is a business, and yes, this is my only business. I've never had a side hustle. There's no safety job for me. So for me, this is it. So I got to factor those kind of numbers in when I'm making a film. But this was one case where, in hindsight, I probably should have made a little less money and put a little bit of that money on the screen because years later, well, obviously that money's all gone now for the
Right,
most
right.
part, all
Sure.
these years later, you spent all the money, but this movie lives on and this movie's still going. Now, I'm not saying that, like, obviously pay your bills, make a decent wage, be comfortable, whatever you got to do. But this is one case where I said to myself, shit, man, like in hindsight, as I'm thinking about doing this show and putting together these notes and watching the movie again, I'm kind of just like saying, man, if I made like even a couple grand less on that movie, I could have hired somebody to come in for a day and do a really kick-ass effect over here. Or, if
Right.
I made a couple less grand, I could have maybe got an extra shooting day, or maybe I could have, who knows what. But you find yourself kind of second guessing that, and obviously, your pocket, your pocket needs to be filled up. Otherwise, like, what are we doing this for? But at the same time, like maybe I could have put a little bit more, as they say, on the screen rather than in my pocket on this movie. And that's probably part of the reason why, uh, you know, we ran into some of the challenges. And I learned that, I really did. Like, I learned moving forward that, obviously there are times when you want to treat yourself financially, but then there are also times when, you got to make sure that you check all the boxes first before you
Right.
get to that point.
Yeah, well, I mean, very well articulated, Tommy, and I appreciate your introspection and everything on this one. And I think, to be honest with you, this topic, this movie, has been a tough spot for me because I had such mixed feelings about it. But I feel a lot better having watched the movie again last night, and I don't want to throw anyone under the bus per se, but maybe I do. I feel like at the premiere of the film, there was some audience members that were very disrespectful to the film. Basically, they came to the theater drunk. They were invited by somebody of importance, so it was kind of a touchy thing to tell these ladies to be quiet. But they came to party, and that's fine. But if they didn't like the movie, they should have just left. And to be honest, they kind of tainted my appreciation for the film that night and for the
Well,
last
yeah,
4 years.
that was a tough night, but Mike, I think you need to kind of let that one go. I mean, I know it was tough, but remember, that was one night where maybe a couple hundred people watched the movie. You got to think about the hundreds of thousands and maybe more than that have watched this movie worldwide. That we don't get a chance to share that night with them, but I feel as though I'm sure a lot of people had a chance to check it out. But I agree with you, man. That was tough. This was a situation where we happened to. I guess the lesson there is part of that was the sound system. I don't want to throw the venue under the bus, but it wasn't the best sound system that we were listening to the film on, and it was our premiere. And like Mike said, we were all very excited. We were all ready to kind of show off our work. And unfortunately, there was kind of a rowdy group of people that were in the back of the theater, just like, and this wasn't a massive theater. It's not like we were at the, one of these like
Right.
big franchise theaters. It was a very small, intimate theater. So like a group of 6 to 10 people cackling enough could kind of like make a bit of a dent into what we were doing, and just was very distracting. And it was almost like watching Mystery Science Theater. And it was tough. But again, I don't want to let those handful of frankly rude motherfuckers interrupt the memory of really a great movie that a lot of people came together and used a lot of unique ways to get it off the ground. But again, as I think about it in hindsight, this is a good time to kind of talk about the upshot to the movie. Lionsgate did end up putting this one out, kind of got a lackluster response. You can check out the reviews; they're not that great.
Right.
And it's one of those things where ultimately, I think that the win in this is just getting to the finish line. And you learn that sometimes as an artist and as a business person within this industry that, um, sometimes a win is just finishing the race. It's
Right.
like it's like the inspirational video of the runner who's limping across the finish line in
Yeah.
last place, and
Right.
they might be in dead last, but damn it, they made it to the fucking finish line.
He's going the
And
distance. He's going for speed.
yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
like everybody remembers, Rocky Balboa lost his first fight, but he
Sure.
didn't get knocked out. So I think
Yeah.
that you could say, not to compare this to Rocky or to Rocky Balboa,
Right.
the Manor may have lost the fight, but it didn't get knocked out. It survived. It made it to the end of the fight. And I know it sounds like kind of I guess you could say everybody gets a trophy, and everybody gets a trophy way of thinking. But it
Sure.
really isn't, because a lot of people came together to do this and make this movie. And I guarantee you, as crazy as it sounds, somewhere out there, there's probably maybe even a few people who every Halloween they put the Manor on. This could be someone's guilty pleasure for all we know.
Well, look, Halloween 4, the season of the witch, was not well received at the time, and it's done better 20 or 30 years later. With the one with the
Of
mask.
course,
So I,
Tom
I
Tom Tom Atkins.
yeah, this one for me, buddy, the Manor. I'm glad we're talking about it. I'm glad we're kind of exercising this demon, so to speak. There are other lessons that I kind of learned from the experience, but overall, I'm definitely glad that we did it. I'm glad that you asked me to be involved. I'm glad that I got to act in it. One thing I felt like on a personal level, I had to go from writer mode to actor mode rather quickly. So once I was in actor mode, I didn't mention my issues with the script. I just wanted to perform whatever's in front of me to the best of my abilities. And one thing that was a nice surprise was that you guys, I'm saying you and you and Sherm or whoever, actually added a pretty important scene with me and Christina. My character of Oli Baden basically sexually assaults Christina, her character of Amy, and this was an intense scene. And through a bit of circumstances, you actually directed us in that scene, and I felt that was the first time you ever directed me. And when you did, I was very impressed. I was like, Tommy was a real cool customer. This is a sensitive scene. This is a sexual assault scene. Christina and I, we get along fine, but we've never worked together before, especially in this type of scene. And she was a very
Yeah, those scenes
professional. You
are
were very
always
professional.
Thanks, man. Those scenes are always very tricky to do, and I take them very I treat them with a lot of care and approach them with a very serious tone because let's face it, the reality is what we're recreating is one of the most awful things that can happen to a human being. So we try to handle it with care. It can be very triggering for actors to be involved in a scene like that. So um, again, kudos. I appreciate the compliment and kudos back to you and Christina for being able to keep in the zone and stick with it, although treading some very difficult subject matter in that scene. So yeah, I was proud of some of those moments, and like I said, I think that uh, it's never going to be black or white. It's never going to be all great or all bad. There's always going to be these gray areas with film, and I think that this one has a lot of gray areas. There's only a lot of things that people could say like, oh, they did. We like that. I don't know, not so much. But at the end of the day, we did make it to the finish line, and I think that at the end of the day, the cousins made their dream project come true. There's a lot of people that probably said, "Are these guys out of their fucking mind?" early
Right.
on, and then by the end of it, the cousins got the last laugh because that movie ended up being. I mean, it's pretty damn cool when you go from kind of just having an idea and you're a 9 to 5 kind of guy, and you're not really having any intentions of having any kind of traction in the movie industry. And then there you go, a year or two later, you've got that classic, iconic Lionsgate logo kind of coming up right before your film, which kind of tells the world, like, hey, a major motion picture studio believed in this project enough to put it out. So can never take that away from the Manor and everybody who was involved in it. Um, if I missed anybody, I apologize, but we do appreciate what everybody did. We did have a lot of fun little challenges on this one. Like, we were shooting in a tiny little a lot of tiny little rooms with smoke detectors, and we're
Right.
using fog machines and everything else. So we definitely had some trips, some visits from the fire department. The South County Fire Department came down quite a few times, and
Yeah.
uh, I think there was an incident where we had an unruly neighbor who kind of came over and just started screaming at us, saying, "This isn't a goddamn Walmart parking lot with all your fucking lights, and I'm calling the cops." And we were kind of like, "You can call the cops. Do you have a permit to be here?" It's like, "Oh, we do have a permit, but this is also a private residence." So we had to deal with the unruly neighbor. That was kind of unexpected. Um,
If I could share a lesson that the cousins might want me to share because they told me this and this was an open thing. They felt bad because they didn't do the step that you did with um, uh, your movie with Sully, Army of the Damned. They did not go around the neighborhood, and really all they had to do was go to like maybe one or two places that were close and say, "Hey, folks, just to give you the heads up, we're going to be shooting a film for the next 12 days.
right.
Here's a plate of brownies and an invitation to stop by the catering if you want to see how a film is made." The cousins told me that they failed to do that. It didn't occur to them, or they just whatever forgot. And they were new guys too, and so that the lesson learned is when you do those type of preemptive strikes of introducing yourself to the neighborhood, you prevent that horrible situation of someone yelling at you for making your movie.
Yeah, I think we
So
talked about
another
that
lesson.
I think we talked about that on the Army of the Damned episode when I shot that movie at my
Yeah.
parents' house. We canvassed the neighborhood. We let everybody know that there's shooting going down, and that yeah, we're gonna be here for a little while. We come in peace. I'm just looking on IMDb here, and I'm kind of combing through some of the photos. If you check it out and you go on IMDb and you look up the Manor 2018, you'll see this movie, and there's a lot of cool photos. And pictures worth a thousand words. And it reminded me. There's this really cool sequence where Christina Robinson, and this is kudos to Gina and Gianna, our hair and makeup team, who basically transformed Christina Robinson into, she's blonde the whole movie, but she has a flashback to her mother who's brunette, and she has this
Right.
like very dark hair in another scene, and they kind of like see each other in the same scene. So if you're poking around IMDb, look at some of these photos, and you'll see, like, again, I'm proud of a lot of this, and it's cool to see it once again, and you realize that again, a strong effort was made on the Manor. and
Make sure you put the
fun to
Manor
kind of talk about it
2018.
today.
Yeah, sorry to cut
Yes,
you
the
off, but I
Manor
wanted to
2018.
right because
No, I
there's a few
appreciate that.
films with the
Or
same
even
title.
if you just type in like Danucci, the Manor, like if you type my name in, it'll definitely come up. But yeah, I mean, check out the trailer. Another cool thing about this one, if you watch the trailer, it has the guy who has this voice,
Oh
the
yeah, yeah.
official like movie trailer guy that does all the voiceovers, does the voiceover for this. He's not easy to get, guys. So shout out to I wish I knew his name, but it's kind of cool. I remember the first time I saw this trailer, I was like, "Oh shit, they got the guy who does all the trailers."
In the
That was
world
pretty.
with monkey
That guy,
shines. Yeah, yeah.
yeah,
He's a
comes a
great.
boy.
Yeah, here's the thing, man. That's kind of the taste test for me. Sometimes I'll watch our 5 minute thing from the summer of 2015, and I'll be honest, I kind of wish that was the movie that got made. You know what I mean? Like that 5 minute proof of concept. To me, certain elements, especially the Standing Man himself, I kind of got into the Standing Man, and so Akamana's presence, I could never really get over that. So it's tough for me because I think one thing, and maybe the lesson for folks is, as a writer or whatever creator, you get married to stuff, whether you mean to or not. You get attached to things, and with a collaboration, like a good compromise, nobody's happy, right? So with collaboration,
Yeah,
it's tough. You can't if you do get married to stuff, like I guess I did with the time travel stuff, 2 different time zones, and the Standing Man. You're really going to set yourself up for disappointment because you can't have 5 people or even 2 people who are both creative people and they both want certain things out of a project. Not No one's going to be 100% happy. And I think for me, this process was a tough one, but a necessary one. Because how are you going to grow and how are you going to develop and how are you going to work with other people if you can't accept that you're not always going to get your way or your vision doesn't come true? And here's another thing for you, Tommy, which I give you credit for, and everybody, Sherm and the cousins especially. A movie that's made where we can sit here 5 years later and criticize it and praise it and critique it and look at different things and analyze it together, that's 1,000 times better than a screenplay that's just sitting on a shelf collecting dust, right? You know what I mean? And I've written 10 or 12 movies that I'd love to have produced, and they haven't been produced. But these guys, the cousins, got into it. They bit into it. They weren't afraid to contact you at the bar. They weren't afraid to take direction. They weren't egotistical enough to deny that they needed some help with the writing. And
and they
so,
put their, you know what, Mike? They put their money where their mouth is at the end of the day,
right.
and that's what it comes down to. And there's a lot of people that aren't willing to do that. And I'm
Yeah.
not saying that everyone's in the financial position to do that, but I want you to know that it
Mhm.
wasn't just them writing a massive check themselves. They use their passion to recruit other people and get they used that passion and made it contagious, and it caught fire and it got other people excited about what they're excited about, and at the end of the day they made their movie, and you know what, like I said, it's going to live on forever. Let's wrap it up and look back at some of the comments here from some of our and action regulars.
And
Again,
appreciate
we
Stephen E, Johnny, Kim, Johnny Yagavane. Is that how we say it? Stephen E. I think it's Stephen Edwards, right? Some of these
Yep,
folks
Stephen Edwards,
were. I mean,
Miss Ash.
Stephen was actually commenting on your post yesterday. What time is the show, guys? Like we actually have some people here that are making this appointment watching. So I certainly appreciate that. Donna Castelloni's Sparadio is a great lady in East Greenwich, Rhode Island. She writes books as well. She has a book that's available. So Donna's a nice lady. I'm glad that she's here. Miss Ash, I'm not sure who that is, but it's nice. And
Miss Ash
Sauron,
is a friend of mine from the Cranston area. Shout out to Ash. Thank you for
okay,
watching the show.
very
I will
good.
say this: I'm not short. Okay, I'm 5'10". Damn it,
No, you're good height, buddy. Don't worry about it.
it's above average. Hi,
I
hi
like
Kim,
it's Steven.
Steven again.
Steven got the Freebirds reference. Sal,
Yeah, Steven's a big wrestling fan.
the tennis highlights. Is there a tournament called the Manor or something? Is that like the the Wimbledon of mixed doubles or something. But Sal, nice to have
Maybe.
you here, buddy.
Yeah, thanks
Nice
for
to,
watching Sal. Sal's an
I think.
actor who makes an appearance in Johnny and Clyde, starring
Oh,
Megan
great.
Fox, which will be coming out soon.
That's awesome.
And then finally, our final comment of the night here, Sweeney Photography, aka Ryan Sweeney. I was certainly very, all caps, green coming into this as my first DP gig on a feature, but that shock of reality most currently gave, I think you might mean
Most
most
certainly.
certainly gave me the injection of seriousness that I've taken with me to my career throughout this to this day.
Great
Right
comment.
on, Ryan. I remember, I don't think Ryan will mind this, and because it's a testament to him and the kind of person he is. I remember after the first day, like Ryan said, he was, first time DP, and we just weren't happy with some of the setups. And I remember we took him aside and we're kind of like, hey man, like we just need this to be a little bit, kind of step the fuck up. And Ryan, to his credit, kind of just said, hey, listen, I'm learning. I'd love to work with Sam if he can help me out in any way to kind of like show me how to quicken my setups and put the camera in a little bit working for us a little bit better. I'm all ears. Ryan had zero ego. He came in, he listened, and he learned. And now Ryan's one of the better DPs that we work with, and I believe he's going to be shooting a movie that we're going to be working together real soon. So
Good.
we'll be
Nice to
talking
see
more
him.
about Ryan down the road. Mike, let's chat about our topic for next week a little bit.
But what is it? I don't know if we decided one.
No, we haven't. We're gonna kind of decide it right now on the
Oh
air with
boy.
our gang. We're gonna put ourselves on the spot. I think that it might be time for us to do a deep dive into an actor, which we haven't done yet.
Okay.
Maybe spend a whole episode talking about somebody that is kind of near and dear to us, and somebody that had an impact. What do you think? Should we do a deep dive on an actor?
I'm up for it. I just don't know who you're talking about.
Well, I don't either, Mike. That's kind of why
Oh, you're asking
I
me
was
for my
wondering.
suggestions. Okay.
Well, I was thinking, my instincts say, since it was my first movie, that I could maybe do an Eric Roberts deep dive. That might be fun.
Yeah, Eric might be fun. Sully might be fun. Kevin Nash. I would actually say Danielle's a great actress, but she's kind of an up and comer still, but she's great. I wanted to say earlier that at one point the sister character or the cousin character Danielle played was written as twins. And one thing I did like in the rewrite was the combination of Blair and Blaine into one character. I think that it was great. That was a great call. And I think
Yeah,
Danielle played the Danielle had to play in that sense, not just the good side of that character, but the bad side, because there were two characters put together. And Danielle's such a great actress that she did it very well. I also want to say, buddy, that the rap party, believe it or not, was a really good experience. We went to a local tavern, and this was also good for me, Tommy. This movie, because this movie was kind of filmed more in my backyard even than yours. Like
yeah, it was a South County movie.
this is a South County movie, and I lived my last 10 years in Rhode Island in Wickford. This is in Wakefield, which is about 15 minutes away. All the coffee houses I went to. I mean, I remember one day I said, Tommy, I went to my regular coffee house in the morning and I went right to set. So, I mean, right in the shadows of the University of Rhode Island, where my mother went to college. So, I mean, there was a lot of cool things. There's some Easter eggs in the movie that I wrote for myself that I saw last night. For instance, Fairview Hospital is actually named after my elementary school, which was Fairview Elementary School.
We
The
love to be able to put those little details in there.
Yeah, the family that Trevor and Blaine, the cousin family, Ethan, they're the Clarks. Well, that's my middle name is Clark, and also my mother's maiden name. So there was definitely some little things that made myself chuckle and smile when I saw them in the film last night that I kind of forgot that were deeply in there and survived the various rewrites and re-envisions. So I was happy to see that.
Well, for you, it was the Easter eggs. For me, it was the people. I really enjoy kind of watching these movies, and I always have. When you're on set, you think about what's going on that the camera doesn't see, and it was kind of fun to think back at some of those moments. And as we say, it's nice to know that they'll live on forever. You can check out the Manor now. It's really easy. All you do is, go on there, and I'll walk you through it right now. If you go into your little search bar, type in the Manor 2018, and if you just say watch now,
Right.
it'll take you to a couple different options that you have,
I
and you
watched
can
it on
watch it
camera.
on Amazon Prime.
Right.
That's a good way to stream it.
I bought it
I,
for
I
$10.
recommend.
I watched it last night for $10. I bought it for a permanent. As long as I have Amazon Prime, I'll have access to the Manor, and
Very
I'm glad.
cool.
I'm glad I did, buddy, because it was like you said, it was kind of like a family reunion, so to speak, to watch all the different people from 5 years ago. You know what I mean? It
Yeah,
was nice
Mike.
to see that.
I think it's good that we did this episode. Mike's had a little bit of kind of mixed emotions about the Manor, and I think that after today, he got a little bit of his frustrations out into the universe, and now we can just kind of embrace it for what it is, which is, hey, we got to the finish line, and like we said, sometimes that's what it's all about. Thank you so much for getting to the finish line with us on this fifth episode of And Action. As always, you can find me on the social medias at Tom Danucci on Instagram, on Twitter. And, please do subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. We appreciate you watching. But, if you're watching and you haven't given it the little subscribe tick, well, we got to build those numbers up because we're going to eventually just try to blow this show up and get as many eyes on it as possible, build this community up, and get everybody in the film frame of mind. So remember, please give us a subscribe. You
Share
can
the
find
URL.
Mike on the socials. Share the URL. Get it out there. Tell all your movie pals about us. And I know we didn't tell you what we're going to do next week, but we'll be hitting you
Well,
out up.
if you
We'll
want to
be
do
we'll be
Eric
hitting you up
Roberts,
soon.
we can do Eric Roberts, buddy. I did want to say that if people go to MikeMessier.com, it's streamlined. I put a lot of time this week into two projects, basically streamlining my web presence, MikeMessier.com. If you scroll to the bottom, I've updated and replenished all my social media links. I've got a new Twitter account exclusively for my acting, writing, and filmmaking, which you can go right to MikeMessier.com and scroll down. My Reddit page is there, Facebook, Twitter, YouTube. My book is still here, Fight or Play Basketball. I'm still selling them out of the trunk of my car, but go to Amazon, pick
Oh
yourself up
boy.
a copy. Just got a nice review from awordofdreams.com, 4.5 stars out of 5 from Andrew Buckner. So I appreciate that. And I finished another Kindle Vella story, Bad Girls with Good Tattoos, can now be
Oh
read,
boy.
for better or for worse. It can be read on Kindle Vella, but you don't need a Kindle machine to read it. Any computer or phone, you can get access to that story. And Tommy, this has been a pleasure. I know that you've had not a rough week, but a busy week. So you might be a tinge fatigued, but I appreciate you hanging in there. We did go almost 2 hours, but you did a great
Yeah, it's
job with this, buddy. Your endurance is building. Your podcast endurance is building. We'll do the 5.5 hour Gold Dust episode in a couple of weeks, I guess.
I appreciate that, Mike, and I really do have to wrap this up because I've got to go back to set now. I'm heading back to the set of the Brian Greenberg film Junction. So that's where I'm headed. Thank you for watching along with us. We're going to see you here next week. Remember, guys, next week we're going to be back to our Tuesday schedule. So look out for us Tuesday. We'll give you the time then. And it looks like we're going to be doing a deep dive on Eric Roberts next week on And Action. We'll see you then.
See you.